I felt called to the ministry. And then the following summer when I went home, I shared it with my parents, and they were delighted because they were Christians, but Dad said, not in a negative way, but he said, but son, there's just one problem. How will you preach? And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, you can't say 3 words without saying, and he said, I just don't see how you're going to preach. And I said, well, you're right, Dad. I was painfully shy when I was a kid, really. And I said, unless God in some measure gives me the gift of preaching, I won't be able to do it, and I'll realize that I just heard wrong, and I'm supposed to do something else. When I came to Rivermont, I think I was a desperation choice, really. They had been without a pastor. The former pastor had been killed in a car wreck. They had called at least a couple of other people and had been turned down. By that time, although the church had a great history of evangelical orthodoxy, the church had gone down a good bit. There was a large, older part of the congregation, a good-sized, middle-aged group in the congregation, but young adults were almost entirely absent. For the first 5 years that I was here, the church did all right, and we had some growth, but not much. And the 5th year was the hardest year of my ministry. I'm not prone to depression, but I felt depressed a lot that year because, as far as I knew, I was preaching my heart out, and nothing was happening that was visible. And I couldn't understand, what's wrong. And someone invited Barbara and me to go out to the InterVarsity Missions Conference that year. That would have been their missions conference in '79. And Gordon MacDonald, who at that time was pastor of the Grace Chapel in Massachusetts, was leading the study that we were in. And his studies were from Isaiah, and I can still remember them. He said, first of all, Isaiah was a contemplative. He spent time in the presence of God. And then he was a commentator. Based on what he learned from God, he commented on what he saw out in society. And then he was a confronter of God's people. And finally, he was a comforter of God's people. And he had 4 mornings. And so each morning he took one of those things that ought to reflect a pastor's responsibility. And the very first morning, God just broke my heart because I realized that I'd gotten frantically busy at the church, trying to pull it out of the hole. And the harder I worked, the less I enjoyed it. And I was secretly angry at the congregation. I didn't spill that anger over to them, but God showed me that needed to be replaced by a love of the congregation, a real care of God's people that had been committed to my shepherding. And it was really transforming to me because I went back home and I deliberately got less busy.